There was one demon in Doom that came closer to defeating the Doomslayer than any other, but it wasn't the strongest demon, and it wasn't the most famous one either. For more than 30 years, Doom has unleashed dozens of terrifying demons. Some became icons of the entire franchise. Some changed the history of Doom forever, and some were so powerful that even the Doomslayer had to pay a heavy price to bring them down. By the end of this video, you'll discover which demon came closest to victory and why it became a legend. Baron of Hell. Before Doom had iconic final bosses, it had a monster that made players question whether they had enough ammunition to survive. The Baron of Hell wasn't the biggest creature in the original game. He wasn't even the last boss. But in 1993, he was the first enemy that truly felt unstoppable. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, the Baron looked like something pulled straight from humanity's oldest nightmares. Thick crimson skin stretched over an enormous muscular frame. Massive curled horns crowned his head, while cloven hooves echoed through dark corridors long before players actually saw him. Everything about his appearance screamed raw power. Then came the first fireball. Unlike weaker demons that collapsed after a shotgun blast or two, the Baron simply kept walking. Rockets barely slowed him down. Plasma rifles chewed through ammunition faster than players expected. For the first time, charging forward wasn't enough. Survival meant keeping your distance, managing resources carefully, and learning that some enemies demanded patience instead of aggression. That lesson would become one of Doom's defining principles. The Baron wasn't difficult because he had complicated attacks. He was terrifying because he refused to die. His enormous health pool forced players to respect every encounter, especially when multiple Barons appeared together. What once felt like a fast-paced shooter suddenly became a desperate fight for survival. His design proved so successful that id Software later created the Hell Knight using nearly the same silhouette, making the Baron immediately recognizable even decades later. But despite countless new demons joining the franchise, the Baron never lost his reputation. Whenever that towering red figure stepped into view, experienced players knew exactly what it meant. The real fight had finally begun. And yet, compared to what Hell created next, the Baron almost looked primitive. CYBERDEMON. If the Baron taught players to fear durability, the CYBERDEMON taught them to fear distance. Because this monster didn't need to reach you. He could kill you from the other side of the arena. When players reached the end of Doom's second episode in 1993, they expected another oversized demon. Instead, they found something far worse. The CYBERDEMON looked like Hell itself had embraced technology. One half remained unmistakably demonic, a towering muscular torso scarred by countless battles. The other half had been rebuilt into a walking war machine. Mechanical goat-like legs supported his immense weight. Steel cables disappeared beneath torn flesh. Most horrifying of all, a rocket launcher had been fused directly into his arm, as though removing it would be impossible. That design quietly suggested something terrifying. Hell wasn't simply corrupting living creatures anymore. It was evolving them. Gameplay reinforced that idea immediately. Unlike nearly every enemy before him, the CYBERDEMON dominated entire arenas with relentless rockets that forced players into constant motion. Standing still for even a moment usually meant death. For many players, this was the moment Doom transformed from a shooter into a dance. Every movement mattered. Every mistake was punished. The CYBERDEMON became one of gaming's earliest examples of a boss whose greatest weapon wasn't just damage, it was pressure. He never allowed players to relax. His influence became impossible to ignore. Every major Doom game eventually brought him back in some form, sometimes redesigned, sometimes reimagined, but always instantly recognizable. Doom 2016 expanded his story even further, revealing that the monster players had feared for decades was connected to catastrophic UAC experiments that blurred the line between science and hell itself. That only made him more disturbing, because beneath all the machinery, there was still a demon. The CYBERDEMON eventually became the face of the entire franchise. Yet even Doom's mascot wasn't its strangest creation. For that, id Software abandoned humanoid monsters altogether. Spider Mastermind. Nothing prepares players for the first time they see the Spider Mastermind. After hours of battling towering demons with horns, claws, and massive muscles, the game's third episode ends with something that barely resembles a demon at all. Instead of legs, there are mechanical spider limbs. Instead of a face, there's an enormous exposed brain. Instead of claws, a devastating chain gun hangs beneath its armored body, ready to flood entire rooms with bullets. The design feels less like fantasy and more like industrial body horror. It raises an unsettling question without ever answering it. Who or what built this thing? Unlike the CYBERDEMON, whose mechanical enhancements still left him recognizable as a demon, the Spider Mastermind looked engineered, manufactured, almost assembled. Its exposed brain suggested intelligence rather than brute force, while its mechanical frame implied that hell had begun turning living creatures into weapons platforms. That visual storytelling became one of the boss's greatest strengths. Even before firing a single shot, players instinctively understood they weren't facing another oversized monster. They were facing a machine designed specifically for war. Years later, Doom 2016 would revisit the concept in the Unto the Evil expansion, transforming the Spider Mastermind into an even larger, faster, and far deadlier encounter capable of overwhelming entire arenas. The original fight may have been simple by modern standards, but its design never stopped being memorable. Because sometimes, the monsters you remember most aren't the biggest ones. They're the ones you've never seen anything like before. Still, even the Spider Mastermind was only a soldier. Hell's true ruler wasn't something you could simply walk up and fight. Icon of Sin. Most final bosses charge toward you. The Icon of Sin doesn't have to. It waits, watching, endlessly feeding Hell's invasion while you struggle to survive. When players finally reached the end of Doom 2, they expected one last duel. Instead, they discovered something unlike any boss the series had attempted before: a gigantic stone skull embedded into an enormous wall. Its eyes burned with hatred. Its jaws opened and closed with terrifying purpose. Behind the opening in its forehead pulsed an exposed brain, the only vulnerable point on an otherwise untouchable monster. But the icon itself wasn't the greatest threat. What it created was, every few seconds, the colossal demon opened its mouth and unleashed wave after wave of monsters into the battlefield. The fight became less about destroying a boss and more about surviving an endless invasion long enough to strike its weak point. It was an unusual design. Some players loved its creativity. Others found it frustrating. But almost everyone remembered it, because no other boss felt remotely similar. Over time, the Icon of Sin evolved from a strange gameplay experiment into the closest thing Doom has to an ultimate antagonist. Environmental clues in Doom 2016 hinted at its enormous influence long before it physically appeared again. Then, Doom Eternal finally unleashed the creature at its full potential. No longer trapped inside a wall, the Icon of Sin towered over entire cities like a living apocalypse. Buildings collapsed beneath its footsteps. Skyscrapers became obstacles rather than shelter. Entire armies stood helpless against a being whose mere existence threatened reality itself. It was no longer simply another demon. It had become Hell's ambition made flesh. And if the icon represented the end of one era, the next generation of bosses would become something even more dangerous. They weren't just powerful, they were learning. Gladiator. By the time players reached the cultist base in Doom Eternal, they thought they understood how Hell fought. Move fast, stay aggressive, never stop shooting. Then the Gladiator completely changed the rules. Unlike the mindless monsters that charged without hesitation, this towering warrior fought with discipline. Every movement felt measured. Every attack had a purpose. It almost looked trained. Standing over 12 feet tall, beneath layers of golden armor, the Gladiator carried an enormous flail in one hand, while a massive energy shield protected the other. His helmet concealed any trace of emotion, making him seem less like a raging beast and more like an executioner, patiently waiting for the perfect moment. The first instinct most players had was simple: shoot the shield. It didn't work. The Gladiator punished impatience more than poor aim. His defenses forced players to stop firing blindly and actually watch his movements. Only when he exposed himself for a split second could meaningful damage be dealt. For a game built around relentless aggression, that small change transformed the entire encounter. Suddenly, timing mattered just as much as speed. As the fight continued, the Gladiator abandoned his defensive posture entirely. His shield shattered, his attacks became faster, and enormous waves of argent energy swept across the arena. Flaming projectiles filled the battlefield, while his flail reached farther than seemed physically possible. The duel escalated instead of simply becoming harder. That evolution reflected something deeper in the lore. The Gladiator wasn't merely another powerful demon. He was Hell's champion, a warrior chosen to stand between the Doomslayer and the forces controlling the invasion. For the first time, it felt like Hell had created an opponent specifically designed to test the Slayer's own fighting style. And if the Gladiator represented Hell's greatest soldier, the next enemy represented something far more personal. Marauder. Few enemies in modern gaming have divided players as much as the Marauder. Within days of Doom Eternal's release, videos, forum posts, and strategy guides exploded across the internet. Some players called him unfair. Others argued he was the smartest enemy ID Software had ever designed. Both sides had a point. At first glance, the Marauder barely looked like a demon at all. He wore heavy armor instead of exposed flesh. A hood concealed most of his face. One hand carried a brutal double-barreled shotgun. The other summoned an ethereal axe capable of striking from impossible distances. And just when players thought they understood him, he called in a spectral wolf to hunt them down. Nothing about the encounter followed Doom's normal rhythm. Shoot too early, and his shield blocked everything. Stay too far away, and the shotgun became an axe. Stand too close, and the shotgun tore through your health. The fight revolved around one tiny detail: his eyes. Only when they flashed green for a fraction of a second was he vulnerable. Miss that opportunity, and the cycle began all over again. For players accustomed to overwhelming enemies with constant firepower, the Marauder felt almost insulting. He demanded restraint, precision, patience, qualities that Doom rarely asked for before. Behind the mechanics lay an even darker implication. Codex entries revealed that the Marauders were once Night Sentinels, the very warriors who had fought beside the Doomslayer long before Hell corrupted them. They weren't random demons, they were fallen heroes. Every battle became a tragic mirror of what the Slayer himself might have become under different circumstances. Love him or hate him, the Marauder accomplished something few enemies ever do. He forced millions of players to completely rethink how they approached combat. But Hell wasn't finished adapting. It had already begun building monsters whose only purpose was hunting one man. Doom Hunter. If the Cyberdemon represented brutal power, the Doom Hunter represented calculated engineering. Everything about its existence was intentional. Unlike ancient demons born from Hell itself, the Doom Hunter was manufactured, built, improved, mass-produced. When one first emerges from its containment chamber, the design immediately feels unnatural. A withered skeletal torso is bolted onto a hovering mechanical platform loaded with missile pods, energy weapons, and reinforced armor plating. Almost nothing remains of whatever creature it once was. The machine has become the monster. Its combat style reflects that transformation perfectly. The heavily armored sled absorbs enormous punishment while missiles rain from above, forcing players to keep moving. At the same time, an energy cannon punishes anyone trying to maintain distance. Destroying the armor doesn't end the fight. It only reveals the second phase. Once the sled explodes beneath it, the Doom Hunter continues attacking with surprising speed despite the loss of half its body. What seemed like a mechanical vehicle suddenly becomes a desperate, close-range predator. The encounter constantly changes, and that's exactly what makes it memorable. Lore reveals that the Doom Hunters were created through collaboration between Hell and the Makers, engineered specifically to eliminate the Doom Slayer after countless previous failures. That single fact says everything. The forces opposing humanity were no longer relying on brute strength alone. They were studying, experimenting, learning from every defeat. Each new creation became more specialized than the last, which made one terrifying question impossible to ignore. If Hell could manufacture hunters, what happened when it built generals? Tyrant. Some bosses test your skill. The Tyrant tests your endurance. Towering over nearly every other demon on the battlefield, the Tyrant enters combat with the same overwhelming presence that made the original CYBERDEMON legendary decades earlier. That resemblance isn't accidental. The Tyrant is essentially the modern evolution of one of Doom's oldest nightmares. Massive armor plates protect much of his body, while a colossal frame allows him to absorb extraordinary punishment without slowing down. Every step feels heavy enough to shake the battlefield. Then he attacks. Sweeping melee strikes force players backward. Explosive projectiles deny safe positions. Relentless pressure leaves almost no room to recover. Unlike bosses built around puzzles or hidden mechanics, the Tyrant wins through persistence. He simply refuses to stop advancing. That simplicity is exactly what makes him so dangerous. Lore places these colossal warriors among Hell's highest-ranking military assets, deployed whenever overwhelming force is needed to break organized resistance. They aren't assassins. They aren't hunters. They're siege weapons with intelligence. By the time players encounter multiple tyrants during later battles, the message becomes painfully clear. What once served as a terrifying final boss has now become just another weapon in Hell's endless army. That's how much stronger the Doomslayer has become. But it's also a reminder of something even more frightening. Hell never stops evolving. Neither do its monsters.